All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are going deep on the life and crimes of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh, okay.
I know what you're thinking. We've all heard the Dahmer story, but have we really? Today we're diving into his Wikipedia entry.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we're going to uncover those weird little details
Yeah.
that make this deep dive truly yours.
Okay, so where are we starting with this?
Well, what I'm really curious about is, was he always destined to be a monster?
Yeah.
Or did something happen along the way,
Hmm.
to kind of push him down that path?
I mean, that's the question, isn't it? And honestly, looking back at Dahmer's childhood, well, that's where things get interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, he grew up in Milwaukee, seemingly a typical Midwestern kid.
Right, right.
But even early on, there were some signs, some hints of a much darker path.
Okay, like what are we talking
Well,
about?
take his fascination with animal bones, for example. I mean, it's not unusual for kids to be curious about nature.
Sure.
But Dahmer took it to a whole other level. Like most kids, they're out there collecting bugs and leaves and stuff. But Dahmer was collecting roadkill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it wasn't just passive curiosity either. His father actually showed him how to bleach and preserve bones, thinking it was like a budding interest in science.
Ugh. It's just, I mean, can you imagine the impact of that?
Right.
Learning to manipulate the remains of living creatures at such a young age?
Yeah. And it's even more chilling when you think about what came later.
Exactly, yeah. And on top of that, it's not like he had, like, the most stable home life either.
Oh, not at all.
His parents fought constantly. His mother had a lot of mental health struggles. She even attempted suicide. It just wasn't a stable environment.
And a lot of experts, especially those who study criminal behavior, would point to this kind of turbulent environment as a potential catalyst,
All right.
It makes you wonder, right? Could a more stable upbringing have changed his trajectory?
Hmm.
But then again, some people are just wired differently.
Yeah, that's true. It's hard to say.
The whole nature versus nurture debate is, well, it's tricky. Never easy to untangle, for sure.
And did you know that Dahmer actually got to choose his younger brother's name?
Oh, really?
Yeah, his brother's name was David,
David, okay.
and Jeffrey got to pick that name. It's almost like, I don't know, maybe he was trying to create a sense of normalcy amidst all the chaos.
Yeah, possibly. But that facade, it didn't last. As Dahmer entered his teenage years, things started to crumble.
In what way?
Well, he became more and more isolated. He started abusing alcohol. And of course, he was grappling with his repressed homosexuality. A lot of turmoil brewing under the surface.
Man, that's a lot for a teenager to deal with.
Yeah, definitely.
And here's where it gets kind of strange.
Okay.
He was known for playing pranks. They even had a name for it, like doing a Dahmer.
Doing a Dahmer? What's that?
It was like faking seizures, making weird noises, just odd behavior.
Yeah.
Almost bizarre to think about, considering what he, became later on.
It is a weird contrast when you think about it. Like, pranks, they're a way of seeking attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
But all of Dahmer's crimes, they were all about control. It's a disturbing shift.
Yeah.
From outward attention-seeking to this darker, more internal desire to exert power,
Could possess them.
Exactly. And that desire, well, it manifested in the most horrific way imaginable. Just weeks after he graduated high school, he committed his first murder.
Right.
He killed Stephen Hicks, a hitchhiker that he lured back to his house.
And this was his first kill.
Yeah.
So this is a pivotal moment, right?
It is. Not only is the act itself brutal,
How did he even do it?
he used a 10-pound dumbbell to bludgeon Hicks to death, but it's also the start of these meticulous attempts to cover up his crimes.
Wait, a dumbbell.
Yeah.
That's awful. And he tried to get rid of the body too.
Oh, absolutely. He dismembered Hicks, dissolved the flesh in acid, and scattered the bones. He even threw that dumbbell, the murder weapon, into the Cuyahoga River. For an 18-year-old, I mean, this level of premeditation
Right.
and cold-bloodedness, it's deeply unsettling.
You'd think that, I don't know, like taking a life, especially in such a brutal way,
Yeah.
would be a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Some kind of reckoning. But for Dahmer, it was just the beginning.
You got it. He actually enlists in the army shortly after.
Really.
Yeah, almost like he's seeking structure and discipline.
To try to fix himself.
Maybe even hoping it'll quell that darkness inside of him.
So he's trying to use the military to, like, fix what's broken.
In a way, yes. But even the rigid structure of the army couldn't contain his demons.
Oh, no. What happened?
He ends up getting discharged for alcohol abuse.
Wow. So even in that kind of environment, designed to instill discipline and control, he couldn't escape his inner turmoil.
It really speaks to how deeply rooted his compulsions were.
Yeah.
After the discharge, he moves back to Wisconsin to live with his grandmother, trying, I guess, desperately to grasp onto some semblance of normalcy.
Right, but I'm guessing, it doesn't really work out that way.
Yeah, as you can imagine, the urges, they only intensify.
And that's where things take a truly dark turn. This is leading into the horrific period known as the Milwaukee murders.
Exactly.
But before we get into that, what are your initial thoughts so far? Like, what's sticking with you about Dahmer's early life?
Well, it's almost like he was trying to outrun his own darkness, but it was always there,
Yeah.
lurking just beneath the surface. And in Milwaukee, that darkness, it fully emerged.
The Milwaukee murders, I mean, they really are the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah.
His Wikipedia entry goes into some pretty graphic detail about each victim, the methods he used.
Mm-hmm.
But what really gets me is how calculated he became. Like, this wasn't just random violence. It was all very organized, very deliberate.
You're right. It was about fulfilling these really twisted fantasies.
Right.
Dahmer even admitted to feeling a sense of ownership over his victims. Like he wanted to, keep them, possess them somehow.
Like trophies almost.
Yeah. Exactly. He collected souvenirs, took photos, even preserved body parts. It's a level of depravity that's just, I don't know, it's hard to even comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
Some psychologists think that this kind of behavior stems from a deep need for control.
Yeah.
A way to exert power in a world where they feel powerless.
And it just kept escalating.
Yeah.
Didn't his own father almost discover some of this, like, horrifying collection?
He did. Dahmer kept a victim's head and genitals in this wooden box.
Oh, my God.
And his dad almost opened it once. It's a chilling reminder of how easily Dahmer was able to conceal this dark side, even from those closest to him.
It's just mind-blowing how someone can compartmentalize something so horrific,
It is.
And tragically, his crimes could have been stopped sooner.
Oh, yeah.
The Conrack Synthesophone incident, that's a
Okay.
devastating example of a missed opportunity.
A huge one. Synthesophone, he was a 14-year-old Laotian boy.
Right.
He managed to escape Dahmer's apartment, naked and disoriented, but when the police arrived, they actually returned him to Dahmer's custody.
Wait, the what? The police actually handed him back to Dahmer.
They did. They dismissed the concerns of some black women who had tried to intervene.
What were they thinking?
It was a catastrophic failure of judgment, fueled by prejudice and just bad assumptions.
Yeah.
The police, they didn't take the women's concerns seriously. They didn't do a proper background check on Dahmer. And ultimately, they just dismissed Synthesophone's condition as, like, a lover's quarrel.
That's just heartbreaking to think about. What happened to that boy?
It is.
And the role that societal biases played in his fate is just, ugh.
Dahmer even showed the police Polaroids he had taken of Synthesophone,
What?
but they didn't even question it. The public outcry after Dahmer's arrest was huge.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, this case really exposed some deep flaws within the system. It forced people to confront the realities of racial bias in law enforcement and really the vulnerability of marginalized communities.
It's just a sobering reminder, Even when there are clear warning signs, societal prejudices can just blind us to the truth.
Mm.
And it makes you wonder, like, how many other times something like this has happened?
Yeah,
And nobody even knew.
that's a chilling thought. And
Yeah.
while Dahmer's victims came from, all walks of life,
Right.
it's hard to ignore the fact that many of them were young men of color, often overlooked or dismissed by society.
Yeah. It's a tragic reminder of the systemic inequalities that still persist. But thankfully, Dahmer's reign of terror finally ended when another intended victim, Tracy Edwards, managed to escape.
Edwards is the real hero in this story. He fought back, he ran, and he led police right back to Dahmer's apartment.
And that's when the really gruesome discoveries were made. A severed head in the refrigerator. Polaroids detailing the dismemberment of his victims. It was like something out of a horror movie.
It's hard to believe it's real. And yet, despite all that evidence, Dahmer was eerily calm during his confession. He described his actions, even the cannibalism, with this disturbing detachment.
He actually said that eating his victims made them feel like a permanent part of him.
Yeah, it's like he was trying to erase the lines between himself and the victims, to control them even in death.
That's chilling.
This detachment is what some criminologists refer to as the banality of evil. The idea that these horrific acts can be committed by seemingly ordinary people in this, like, bureaucratic, matter-of-fact way.
It's such a hard concept to wrap your head around. It forces us to confront the reality that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. And in Dahmer's case, that evil was eventually put on trial.
The trial was huge, highly publicized, a lot of debate about whether Dahmer was truly insane or just evil.
What do the experts say?
Well, there were testimonies, psychological evaluations, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
But the jury ultimately found him sane, responsible for his actions.
So what happened?
He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, making sure that he would never walk free again. But Dahmer's story, it doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
No. His imprisonment sparked a whole new set of questions about justice, punishment, the consequences of evil.
Right.
And his death. Well, that just added another layer of complexity to this already convoluted story.
Okay, I'm ready. Bring on part 3. Let's get into it. Dahmer's death in prison.
It's like I don't know, almost like an inevitable conclusion to this dark story, right?
Yeah, you could say that. But did it really bring closure? I mean, can there ever really be closure in a case like this?
That's a really good question. For the families of the victims, I can't imagine there ever being true closure, Right, the pain and trauma they've experienced. It's unimaginable. And the reactions to his death, they were all over the place. Some people felt it was justice served.
Yeah.
Others felt conflicted, even saddened,
It's strange.
It really is. It speaks to the complexities of human emotion, especially when you're dealing with such a monstrous figure. I mean, Dahmer was evil. There's no question about that. But he was also a product of his environment, mental illness, a society that failed to intervene. It's hard to reconcile those two things.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned earlier about Dahmer's belongings. There was that plan to auction them off after his death. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. That was a whole other can of worms.
It just sparked so much controversy.
It was just exploitative. Like, we were trying to profit off of tragedy. It really raised a lot of ethical questions about our obsession with true crime and, where's that line between remembrance and sensationalism?
It's almost like people wanted a piece of the darkness,
Yeah.
A tangible connection to this whole horrific story. But there's this group in Milwaukee. They raised enough money to buy and destroy all of Dahmer's stuff.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they wanted to, erase any possibility of his belongings becoming these, ghoulish collector's items.
That's pretty powerful. Like a way to reclaim control, deny him any further notoriety. And they even demolished the apartment building where the murders happened, turned the site into a vacant lot. It was like this physical attempt to erase what had happened there.
But can you really erase memory, though? I mean, Dahmer's case continues to fascinate and horrify people. He's the subject of so many books, documentaries. There's even that Netflix series. He's almost larger than life now.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It speaks to our fascination with true crime, with trying to understand the darkest parts of humanity. But it also makes you think about our responsibility as consumers of these stories. Are we just being voyeurs, rubbernecking at tragedy?
Right.
Or can we actually learn from these cases? Can we use this knowledge to prevent future tragedy?
That's the question, isn't it? And I think that's something each of us has to kind of grapple with on our own. This deep dive has definitely left me with more questions than answers.
What I find most compelling about this whole Dahmer case is how it intersects with so many larger issues: mental health, societal failures, the justice system, our own morbid curiosity. It's this big, complex tapestry of darkness. But even within that darkness, I think there are threads of insight waiting to be discovered.
So after this exploration, what stands out to you about Dahmer? The man, the monster, the whole societal context. What's resonating with you the most?
For me, it's the missed opportunities, the signs that everyone overlooked, the moments where, maybe someone could have intervened. It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to create a safer, more compassionate world, a world where the Conorax and Thassophones, are protected, not dismissed.
That's a really powerful thought to leave us with. And if anyone wants to delve even deeper into this case, I mean, the Wikipedia entry on Jeffrey Dahmer, it's a rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah.
Just remember, knowledge, it's a double-edged sword. It can illuminate the darkness, but it can also leave us with some pretty unsettling truths.
Well, that's the journey of a learner, isn't it? Questioning, exploring, trying to understand, even when faced with the unimaginable.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.